So how you doing? Hey, I'm out here in the shop. I'm going to be tearing down Bodie's XL-76, his Homelite XL-76. We are going to port this saw, but during the teardown process, I figured I'd bring you along because I always find issues. Pretty much every time I tear a saw down, I find issues. I don't know if it's because of how closely I look, but I always seem to find something. So I'm going to bring you in and show you the highlights of this teardown, and she'll probably be a shorter video, but you'll get to see kind of any of the issues we find along the way. So sometimes they're small and sometimes they're big. And this time I think we're going to be somewhere in the middle. So, hey, check it out. All right, so we're tearing Bodie's saw down. And anytime you're doing a teardown like this, you just want to pay a lot of close attention just to, make sure you catch anything that might be wrong with it, right? So I found a few little things, and let me kind of show you. Maybe it'll give somebody out there some pointers to in which, some areas they might be able to watch. So as I got it tore down, I noticed we have the wrong spark plug in it. Bodie probably didn't even realize it. He probably received it with this plug. It does not take an RJ7. I believe it's a CJ7. So the plug itself is not that long. The reed cage, if you look in there, there's chips, sawdust. If I pull this off, okay, so I got that pulled apart, but you can see how there's chips in there, sawdust. That would happen when you got an air leak and she's sucking chips through that particular area. One of the reasons you see me doing so much MotoSeal on these is because of those issues. Now, for the chips to get into this area, the leak would have been right here somewhere, or at the handle. It probably was getting sucked down right here at this gap at the handle and into the reed cage. Especially for the size of those chips, I'm willing to bet that's where it came from. Now, whenever I put it back together, you're gonna see a lot of MotoSeal put in here, Now the intake block is broken. If you look up in there, you can see the crack on both sides. So that'll give a pretty good air leak. So we'll end up looking to replace that. I'll have to get on eBay. I don't think I have any more here. So I'll have to get on eBay and see if I can find one. And if you're trying to find these, try to find a new old stock if you can, just to help prevent the issue, because most people who have them on eBay that are used aren't going to check for that, and you might end up buying one that has that crack in it. You can see it out here. It comes from the bolts and the way they get tightened up. They have a tendency to break right there. So you can see where the crack goes to the inside on both sides. Now I pulled the oil pump off, and that oil line right there, she's shot. She's coming apart really. She's super gummy. So I'm going to look at replacing that oil line. And there's like a little metal clip here that holds it on. That clip ended up shattering while I was pulling it apart. But this piece of oil line here is just, she's pretty rough. She's borderline turning to gum, you know what I mean? So it's going to get replaced. The seal here, that's still factory seal, so we'll end up replacing that. Definitely a factory seal there. Now over here, I pulled the flywheel off, and you can see how one of the bolts appears to have been rubbing on the flywheel. And you can see damage here from where it rubbed. And then I can also notice that the seal has been replaced. So we got a little bit there to tell us a story. Why would that flywheel be rubbing that screw? And I decided to start rotating it. So there's no plug in it, but in order for me to rotate this, I can barely get her to move with one hand. Barely. I actually had to put a hand on both sides of the crankshaft and pull really hard to get it to rotate. So I can barely get it to move. It should be moving really easily right now. So that tells me that we probably got some sort of a bearing issue or something going on inside to this crankcase. Especially because we got that damage there. The crankshaft might be shifted to one side or something. You know what I mean? That would cause the flywheel to want to make contact with that screw. So I think when we pull it apart, we're going to pull it apart all the way down to the bearings and work on it from that point. So I'm at the point now where I'm ready to pull the cylinder off. So I'll come back here and we'll pull that cylinder off. Alrighty. Okay, so I got the cylinder off, and there appears to be two reasons why she's so tight. One of the reasons is carbon. You can see there's a lot of carbon in here. You wouldn't think so, but it's built up around the rings and everything, and it made the piston really tight in the cylinder. We're just gonna have to clean that off, and that'll help that. It's in with the rings and everything, so we're gonna have to deal with that. The reason this carbon is built up like this is because it had the air leak at the intake. See, Homelites have a reputation that people don't know about unless you're really, really deep into the mechanics of them, and that's because they are capable of tuning around a very substantial air leak. And I would say this one probably had a very substantial air leak. So what happens when you have an air leak is you're introducing a lot more air into the crankcase that you don't have control over. The only thing you have control over is the amount of fuel. So in order to compensate for that air leak, you basically have to start pushing more and more and more fuel to compensate for it. And what you end up with is such a large amount of fuel getting ran through the saw that the exhaust ports basically don't have the ability to expel all of them extra gases that you're creating, and you end up getting the carbon running down in through the transfers and into the crankcase. So all those exhaust gases are actually making their way all the way down in through the transfers. So if you ever see evidence of that, that's part of the reason. Now, you can also get this if you have too little of a blowdown time. So if you're into porting and stuff, you can have that if you don't have enough blowdown. Because, the blowdown is the amount of time that the exhaust gases have to escape before the transfer opens. And if you're not getting all your exhaust gases out, you're going to start creeping them down through the transfers towards the crankcase. So if you're ever wondering if your blowdown is correct, just pull the cylinder off. Put a bunch of hours on it, pull the cylinder off. Make sure you feel like you got her tuned up really well, before you do that. But pull it off and see if you're getting a bunch of carbon into the transfers. That'll tell you if your blowdown time is enough. Well, this side here looks a bit better. That's the way they're supposed to look. But if you look at the bottom of that transfer, right down here, you see that shiny spot? I would say that we probably had another air leak right there too. And the air was allowing it to, keep it clean. All that fresh air coming through. So I would say we had another air leak right there on top of the one at the intake block. And if my suspicion is correct, we probably have another air leak at the seals, which probably are the reason those bearings are so tight. When you have an air leak at the seal, and here, or this side's easier. So when you have an air leak here, she's sucking air through there, and that air will keep your fuel oil mixture from hitting that bearing, and it'll cause your bearing to seize up. because you just have so much air volume coming through here, it won't let it properly lubricate. Now, another thing I noticed, let me get you zoomed in here. So you see that? That is sawdust buildup in the crankcase from leaking all through the intake. So yeah, we're going to go through the whole saw top to bottom, get everything in order, get these leaks fixed, and get her up and running better than new. You know? Now you can see how during the disassembly process, we had clues along the way to what we were finding here in the end. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to make this video is, you know, we had evidence of issues, and the further we tore into it, the more issues we found. And it's not often, or I should say, it's not always as simple as fixing a simple air leak. Sometimes there's other issues further down in there that you don't know about. So yeah, a little video on this teardown, and I'll be working on these bearings and so forth, probably off screen. So hey, we'll catch you on the next one. Later.